Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you cruise a little smarter. And it's just me today. It's a busy fall. I guess we're moving into the holidays, and I'd like to welcome back to the show one of our favorite guests all the way down in California. How are you doing this morning, Lauren?
Great. I am so excited to be here.
I was lucky enough to, on a layover, to meet you and your amazing husband. And thank you so much for the coffee a couple weeks ago.
No, we had a great time. It was so cool to kind of, we talk on Zoom, but to put a face in person to it all. So it was a good time. Yeah, always fun to talk with fellow travelers and just, that's the reason why I started this podcast. I mean, I like Disney Cruise Line and everything like that, but really my true passion is travel. So I love to be able to talk to the two of you about your travels, and they're never short like ours this past weekend. But we are going to talk about your guys' latest trip this last summer. It was a long time coming for us, and we were super excited to finally make it happen.
So as I said, your cruises are never short. This was an 11-night Northern European cruise that you guys jumped on the Disney Magic in, it looks like, was it July or August? I guess when the cruise.
It was the very end of July.
Very end of July. Okay, so give us the overview. How did this cruise come about, and what were you excited about on this sailing?
We originally booked this cruise all the way back in 2020. It got canceled. We moved it to 2021. It got canceled. We moved it to 2022. And a couple of months before our cruise in 2022, we got the email that we were all expecting and dreading from DCL that said our itinerary was going to be changed because this cruise was one that was supposed to go to St. Petersburg. And so they didn't know how they were going to change it. They didn't know what they were going to do, but they just wanted to give us the heads up. So we waited a couple more months. It was a kind of a long wait. And we decided that we were going to go on the cruise more or less regardless of where they ended up the itinerary going. At this point, as long as it wasn't somewhere that we really weren't interested in, we were just going to treat this as a fun experience regardless of where we went and go for it. And so we got the email. It was really only a couple of months before this cruise left our itinerary, and it honestly looked great to us. And we said, great, let's go. And so we went on an 11-night cruise all over kind of random places in Northern Europe. They sort of, fit in what they could to work with the change. And so we kind of went all over to different cities in Europe.
And that's a good point that you bring out there. The cruise contract that probably very few of us actually read. I don't know if you actually read that, but one of the things that can happen to you is those ports can change, and they can change them last minute if they have to, even while you're on the ship. And obviously, St. Petersburg was changed due to the war over in Ukraine with Russia and everything like that. So I'm sorry you didn't get to go to that city. That's just an amazing city to be able to see so much history. But holy cow, I was looking at your itinerary. And like you said, we did a Baltic cruise where we just kind of chugged around the Baltic and went to a bunch of different places. But you guys got to add Norway and a couple other places as well. So this was a really exciting cruise. But before we get on the ship, you guys had a little bit of fun in Paris.
We did. We had decided long ago that if we ever did another European cruise that left out of Dover, that we were going to tack on a couple of days in Disneyland Paris. It's pretty easy to get to and from Dover and to Disneyland Paris and back. And we felt like if we were ever in that part of the world again, we just wanted to go and see Disneyland Paris. And I got to be honest, I had pretty ho-hum expectations of what Disneyland Paris was going to be like. And we had an absolute blast. We tacked on 3.5 days, flew into Paris, and just had so much fun. I mean, there's nothing like going to your first Disney park, and that's kind of a rarity for people like us who get to go to the parks pretty often. And so going to a brand new Disney park we got all the magic of a first park again. We got to go on all the new rides that we had never been on. Disneyland Paris has quite a few rides that aren't in other parks, or rides we hadn't had a chance to go on, like Ratatouille in Walt Disney World, and to do all the really fun stuff. And it's really cool to be in another park in another place in the world. It's kind of fun to hear rides in French or, to see how they handle different entertainment things. And, Phantom Manor was, their equivalent to the Haunted Mansion. And wow, I really try not to spoil the rides, even if I'm not going to go to the park forever. And I don't look at ride previews for any rides in any parks if I haven't already been there. And I had no idea what to expect with Phantom Manor. And wow, that was totally not what I would have thought going into a Haunted Mansion ride. But it was still super cool, and just getting to experience all that stuff, going on, all of the roller coasters that they have there. There's a lot of inversion roller coasters, and just doing all that fun stuff for a couple days before the cruise was really a highlight of the trip for us. We didn't kind of expect that going in. We thought, well, we'll just do it to check it off that list of Disney parks we've been to. And instead, I hate to say this, Chris will kill me, but it might be my favorite castle right now. Like, I fell in love with the castle in Disneyland Paris.
I've heard nothing but great things about the castle, and that's not the one with the dragons in the basement, is it?
It is, yes.
I mean, I just think that's such a cool touch in and of itself. Did you make it down there to see it?
We did. One of the things about Disneyland Paris is it's a park that sort of invites a lot of exploration. If you're just there to bang out rides, you can absolutely do that. But the park is really designed and encourages and has all these kind of little secret little things you can do. And they're not necessarily, they're not hidden, but they're not advertised. Like, we found out that you can go all up onto the second floor of the fort in their, their Frontierland area. And we had no idea. Like, I was like, wait, where's that stair go? That's not a cruise stair, right? It doesn't have a gate. And we went up, and you can go all over the second floor. And there's not like a sign that says line up here to go. It's just sort of open for exploration. And there was a lot of that in Disneyland Paris. And so we found all sorts of cool little things. Honestly, we didn't have enough time to do all of that. And I had not expected to have all those little kind of hidden treasures to be able to explore in a brand new park.
I mean, I remember the first time we walked through the castle in Disneyland itself, and they've got that little walkthrough where they've got a couple dioramas and everything like that. I thought that was just super cool. So I would love to go over there and explore that park. Not to mention, just Phantom Manor, I've heard, is just amazing. And we're huge fans of Big Thunder, and Big Thunder is supposed to be a fun ride as well.
Yeah. So I'm in the pro Disneyland group for most rides. Honestly, if you ask me to compare, and I think I liked Big Thunder and Disneyland Paris better. That hurts me to say, it does, but it was amazing. And again, I went in not knowing, kind of assuming it was sort of the same ride, and was so surprised. And Jason and I got off and went, wow, that was unexpected and awesome. And so, it was just a great way to start our trip, and something I'm so glad that we committed a couple of days to doing, even if it made our trip that much longer.
Okay, so 2 quick questions for people that want to get to Disneyland Paris. Did you book this yourself, or did you go through a travel agent?
No, we did book it ourselves. It's relatively easy these days online. The site's in English. You do your research and figure out what you want, what kind of package you want. There's definitely some challenges here and there, but some of that stuff, even from when we booked, is getting smoothed out, and they're making it easier and easier for people not in France to book.
And then you guys stayed in the Sequoia Lodge. What would you rate that towards? Is that like the Grand Californian, or if you go to the Walt Disney World, was it kind of like Wilderness Lodge, or is it more like kind of a moderate resort over there feel?
A little of all of both.
Okay.
I know that's not really helpful, but somebody explained it to me the way they kind of think of hotels in France are a little different. Not how they're designed, but like people just use them as a place to sleep. So the lobby was really great. They had kind of a lot of the amenities you would expect from like the Grand Californian or Wilderness Lodge. The rooms were kind of more of a moderate, but again, we weren't in the room much. They were perfectly fine. They were nice. They had great beds, were pretty comfortable. They had, your desk, your chair. They didn't have like a kitchenette or anything. Again, we were there for 3.5 days. It really didn't matter. The location really can't be beat. If you're used to the Disneyland experience where you can walk from your hotels to the parks, that's what we got. We literally had a 15 to 20 minute walk in every morning through security, right into the park, no commute necessary, which was absolutely game changing when you're trying to squeeze in as much as you can. It also made for that afternoon rest midday possible, which we took every day when the parks are the busiest. We always bailed for a couple hours just to relax at the resort. So it's kind of a little bit of both, everything, all of it.
Okay, two more quick questions then. You guys got to eat a lot of different places. I'm a huge fan of Mr. Toad. You guys ate at Toad Hall for lunch. How was that?
Okay, so I know that seems like really you're in Disneyland Paris and you ate at Toad Hall for lunch. Yes, but there was a reason. They had just come out with a new menu really pretty shortly before we went, and they offered vegetarian fish and chips. And you might remember I'm a vegetarian, Jason is not. I was super excited to go try like restaurant quality vegetarian fish and chips. And so it was like a must for me. It was like yeah, okay, we're going to go have it. It was really good. I'll be honest. Like it was good fish and chips as far as I could tell. And Jason said it was, good fish and chips. So I know that seems like really that's where you ate, but yeah, we also ate at some other, pretty cool places, but that was kind of our last ditch lunch before we left Disneyland Paris.
In 3 days, you think that's enough to be able to see Disneyland Paris, or what would you recommend?
So we did 3.5, basically. We got in an evening, and so we did a half day in the evening, and then 2 full days, and then I guess another half day. So kind of 3 days. I guess it depends on how much you want to see, how much you want to go, and what time of year. We were there in the middle of summer. It's a little busier, but the park is open a lot later. A lot later. I mean, we were in the park at 11:30 p.m. and finishing up stuff. And so we were fine going, first thing in the morning, taking a rest break and going all the way till the basically park closed every night. And so I think we saw a majority of what we wanted to see in that 3-day time period. If you're there during the winter and shorter hours, I think you have to kind of take that into consideration, because the middle part of the day does, like any Disney park, get busy. And so, or if you're willing to pay to, fast pass through all the lines, you can cut your time down. We only did that on one ride where we felt it was really necessary. And so we were able to do it in 3 days. So I think if you want to tack on 1 day and pay a lot of money to do the rides, you can. If you want to tack on 3 days and go to a more leisurely pace, that's a good amount, especially before a cruise, because this was not the only part of our trip.
I'm totally struggling because we're going to go to Paris in June, and I want to add on Disneyland Paris for at least a day, but I think 2 days is going to be but I don't know. We'll see how that's going to mesh in with everything else we've got planned. Okay. So let's get you over to Dover. So you said this, but just for everybody else, you guys flew to Paris, did Disneyland Paris, and then you took the train through the Channel to get you over to England. How'd that work out?
I got to Dover. It was an adventure of the trip. Let me say that. This has all changed. Again, I always feel like everything changes after we've done it. But at the time of our trip, you could take the Eurostar directly from the train station at Disneyland Paris straight to the train station in London. So we booked that. We went at our check-in time. It was an absolute mess. Now they have to, you basically have to go through customs to leave Paris. And so they are not prepared for that at that station, which is why they are no longer doing direct trains from that station as of basically the end of this year. And I can understand that. So there was a huge delay getting us set out onto our train because they could not process all the people on the train fast enough for us to leave on time. But once you're processed, because it's through security, they basically put you out on the platform of the train, and you just have to sit there with all of your luggage. There's no train, and wait until everyone is processed. That was 2 hours for us, and that was 2 hours without food, water, or a restroom. Not exactly ideal. We get on the train, we're ready to go. Our nonstop train had issues and ended up being a stop train to pick up some stranded passengers from some other train that had somehow dropped them off randomly somewhere. I'm still not really clear. They tried to put them all on. They didn't assign them seats. That ended up being sort of a hassle. In the process of all that, somebody was trying to put a bag in an overhead bin and dropped it smack on top of me. Not a pleasant experience and not a light bag. So because of all the delays and all the issues, we got into our London station late, and we had a connecting train down to Dover. We've taken this train before. We were really comfortable. We had given ourselves a huge buffer of time to make the connection. And I don't know if even we had realized how long the line to get through customs at the London train station was going to be. I have never, ever, ever in all of my travels seen a line that long. It was over an hour. It went from the customs booth all the way up into the back and around and up to our train platform. And it was probably, if you got in the end of that line, probably over close to 2 hours again. We were in it for almost an hour. We got through and our train had already left for Dover, which there's plenty of trains normally to Dover, but we were sort of up on a hard line, not because of our cruise, but because at midnight that night, the workers on the local trains in London and England were striking. So at midnight, there was going to be no more trains for 24 hours to get us to Dover. And so we literally had to go into a customer service area and be like, hey, can we change our tickets? There's one more train to Dover. This is late at night. And they gave us the tickets and they told us the platform and they told us the time. And we had one of those movie moments where we were running, dragging all our luggage, running Home Alone style through the London train station. We jumped on the train on our platform. We looked at each other and went, this is the train we're supposed to be on, right? Jason ran up to a conductor, confirmed that this was the train to Dover. And literally as he did that, the train pulled away. So luckily we were on the right train and we got into Dover, got into our hotel and collapsed with having had a very nutritious dinner of chips and candy because we had no time to do anything. So it was quite the adventure just to get ourselves to Dover.
Wow. Yeah. A couple of things to note there. It's because England went through the Brexit. You now have to go through customs because they're not part of the European Union anymore, which that causes problems. We had to go through the same thing too this last summer, which adds all to the stress of things that you didn't used to have to do. So good. I'm glad you guys made it. Crazy chaos getting there. Lucky to get on that last train too before the strike started. But I guess good to know for our listeners that, especially when you're traveling through Europe or anytime, leave a day or a couple of days or whatever else ahead of time, especially with connections on flights too, because I'm hoping that next summer is going to be a little bit better. This summer was kind of a meltdown at times. But hopefully they'll get it a little bit more streamlined next summer.
Yeah, we had left ourselves what we felt like was a really good buffer, and it turned out not to be enough. So I think really think about how tight your connection is and how important it is for you to get somewhere on time and leave some extra room, because man, that is not the way you want to start your day before a cruise transition between places. I cannot imagine if I had missed that train, what we would have done. That just would have been absolutely, Dover is a couple hour car ride from England. And so that would have been quite the challenge for us, hauling a bunch of suitcases, because although we try to pack somewhat light, for as long as we were gone, we were not in the 4 outfit packing group. Mostly me, but it is what it is.
Yeah, good points there. And I think I think several of the cruises next summer are actually leaving. I'm totally drawing a blank on the port, but it's closer to London. But Dover is a ways. We luckily signed up for Disney Transportation when we left out of Dover because the London Marathon was happening that day, and it was just like chaos. It took us forever to get out of London. We were the last bus that pulled up into Dover. And when we left out of there too, so it is quite a ways away from London if you're staying there. So you guys checked into your hotel, stayed there, got up, and let's kind of go over the cruise itinerary just real quick. Make sure I say this right, Lauren. So you're on the Disney Magic again, which you guys have been on a bunch. We'll talk about that in just a second. And you go from Dover to Amsterdam, then over to, I can never say this town's name, Zeebrugge, Belgium.
Yeah, which is basically the port for Bruges.
Okay, Bruges. Day at sea. Then you're over to Oslo, Skagen, Denmark, Warnemünde, Germany, which is your gateway to Berlin if you want to go there. Another day at sea, Stavanger, Norway. Kind of going back and forth there, day at sea. And then you head over to Fredrika, Denmark, and you disembark in Copenhagen. Wow, what a whirlwind kind of trip. So you guys have been on the Magic before. What were you excited about getting back on the Magic? And I do have to ask, what do you think about the Dream going there next year?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot, aren't you?
I know.
We love the Magic. It's our favorite ship. I can't really tell you why. It just is. I will say it looked great. The food was good. I think the food is always better in Europe. They use different suppliers than they do elsewhere. And so you get a different quality of food and just we enjoy being on the Magic in Europe quite a bit. I think the only difference for me was the Magic has always been the ship that has the crew that's been there the longest. It's been like the really like crew's been there since day one. It's the same crew. And there was a lot of crew changes. Not everybody, but a lot. It was a lot of earning my ears. There was a lot of new people. There was a lot of people in new positions. And so it had a little bit less of that, like, oh, we're back and everybody, we recognize and know kind of feel, but that didn't make it any less of a special cruise. And as for the Dream, all right.
Have you been on the Dream? I can't even remember now because you guys go to the Caribbean.
No,
I know.
No. So I can't speak to the Dream. What I can, I feel like I'm at least comfortable saying is the Dream is more people. The ports, when the Disney ship pulls in, are already really full of people when you get everybody off the ship. Disney sometimes already has a hard time coming up with enough port adventures for everybody to do, enough transportation to get everybody places. We even ran into that on this cruise with less people. And the Dream is now going to be dumping more people in Europe. And so I think if they figure out a way to handle that, it could be great. If they are doing exactly what they're doing for the Magic, it's going to add a lot more stress to the process, is my feeling.
I mean, I'm thinking about because we've got basically a Greece cruise booked, and I'm sorry, I'm going on a little weird segue here. Greece cruise booked again next year. It's on the Dream, and in Santorini, if you're on a port excursion with Disney, you were off first. But there was a lot of people that didn't, were just going to do things on their own. And it's a tender port, and so there was a lot of people that weren't able to get on the tender and over onto land as soon as they were hoping to. And to your point, with the Dream, with that many more people that you're having to compete with to get over there, it will be interesting to see how that turns out. Dream's amazing ship. It's going to be interesting to see. So, all right, let's get you on your cruise. Love the Magic as well. Makes me sad that she's not going to be there next summer. Just doesn't seem right for some reason.
I know, me too, a little bit, honestly.
All right, let's just talk about the ship. What were some of the fun things that you guys were able to do on the ship? What are some of the things that you and Jason like to do when you're on board? As far as, do you like to go to the spa to remind everybody? Do you do the lounges? What are some of the things that you like to do on board?
Everything, all of it. This cruise actually ended up being a little different for us in that sense. Normally, I like to spend some time in the spa. We like to go to lots of trivia. We'll spend some time hanging out in the lounges, going to the shows, seeing like even just some of the musical acts that are in different, lounges around the ship. But this cruise was really, really port heavy. It was a lot of ports and it was really busy. And so we already knew going in that we were probably not going to be doing as much things on the ship as we normally would plan to. And we were okay with that. As somebody now who's been on a few cruises, I don't mind if I don't get to go to towel folding. I've already made my peacock towel animal. And I'm there more as a way to see the ports. But I think if this is a first cruise, this is a really challenging first cruise because you want to do everything on the ship and everything in the ports. And that is just that's not realistic. There is no way, or you're just never going to sleep and you're going to be exhausted 2/3 of the way through. So we really looked at this cruise as more of a way to get between ports and see everything. And we just generally spent less time doing ship stuff, but we went in knowing we were going to do that. We still went to dinner and went to some shows and, did fun things like that. But overall, we spent a lot more time sort of lounging around on the ship than we normally would on a cruise. I mean, on a transatlantic, we have like 6 sea days and we're doing all the fun sea day stuff. And on this cruise, there was no 6 days in a row where we were not off at a port at 7 a.m. and back on at a port at, 6 p.m.
I think that's really good advice there. And you get a really neat, and the bulk of the show is going to be talking about the ports and you guys' experiences there. But I think that as we've talked about a lot of times on our show, and as you just said too, I think you have to really think about like what port adventures you're going to do so that you're not doing, 4 days in a row of long port adventures and then trying to do stuff on the ship. We kind of try and find one day where we do pick up port adventures, like maybe just a half-day port adventure in Europe, which can be challenging sometimes depending upon what port you're in. And then in the evenings, we would just pick like maybe one thing to do. Maybe we go to trivia that night, maybe we go see the show, or maybe we just kind of chill out and hang out. So I think all good advice there. Well, you guys or anything else you want to touch on the ship with the dinner? I think you're right on with the food too. I love the food in Europe. There's just something different about the quality over there. And we've always had good meals.
Yeah, I think this was kind of a new cruise. idea approach for us is we've never done a cruise where we are in so many ports all at once. It's just not been the way we've cruised up until this point. And we were in so many ports that we wanted to try food in that, again, we did not focus on eating on the ships. We were okay when we missed a dinner on the ship. I mean, we kind of told our servers ahead of time, hey, don't worry if we don't show up. We're just, if we're in a port late and we find somewhere we want to eat or something looks interesting. There was definitely some stuff that I had my eye on going into this trip that I wanted to try. And I'm always, found some surprises. And so for us, the ship was more about the transportation and the floating hotel room than it was anything else. And that was our choice. It didn't have to be that way. That was kind of how we went into it. And so even though the food was really good, we ate less of it than we would on a normal cruise for us, just because you're in Europe and there's so many great things to try. And I love to try new foods or find foods that I've had before that I can't get anywhere else outside of, that part of Europe.
I hate to keep adding on, but I think this is, if you can do a second dining in Europe too, that is like huge, because if you're on that main dining, it's a rush to get back, and you can come back on the ship, maybe take a shower and relax a little bit before you go to dining as well. Or you can decide not to and go to Cabanas and have dinner at Cabanas that night or someplace else. So, or eat in the ports, as you said. Okay, Lauren, let's jump into the ports themselves. You start off in Amsterdam, a place that I have not been to in a very long time. And I'm not going to tell you what year I was in Amsterdam last, because that's really going to age me. Although I think everybody knows I'm a little bit older. But you guys start off in Amsterdam. Have you been there before? And what did you guys have planned there?
We haven't. And Amsterdam was kind of one of those places that there were things in Amsterdam I've always wanted to see, but I never really thought I'd get to Amsterdam. And so I was really excited that this cruise went to Amsterdam, and I was finally going to get to kind of check off some stuff on my personal bucket list to do. And so when I was planning out our cruises and our, like what we were going to do in each port, this was a port that Disney did not offer what I wanted to do, which meant I got to do it on my own, which had, some of its own challenges. But we planned to do this port on our own to make sure we did my two, like, absolute, like, have to do when I'm in Amsterdam things.
Which were?
I have always wanted to go and see the Anne Frank house. Like a lot of kids, I read the book as a young child, and just the idea of being able to walk through that place in history where it's more or less untouched. They have left it the way they found it when it was, used by the Frank family. And the idea for me of just being able to if you know the story, there's a hidden annex room where the Frank family hid for many, many months during World War II. And there's a bookcase that blocks the door. And the way they have this tour set up is you get to walk through that bookcase, just like the Frank family did. And I have to tell you, that was a moving experience for us. I don't think we were prepared for how just walking through those halls. I mean, you walk into Anne Frank's room and the posters she put up are still there, not reproductions. The real things are still there. The check marks from her growth are still on the wall. And just getting to experience that was sort of an awe moment for us. I mean, we walked away from that. You're on vacation and you're having a ton of fun, but we walked away from that tour and needed a minute. It was a really moving experience for us. And it was something I do not regret giving time to doing at all. And booking tickets for that is challenging, to say the least. And I'm glad I put in the effort to do it.
You put a chill up my spine talking about walking through the bookcase there. And we went there. I went there as a kid, and I'm a big World War II history buff. So yeah, I mean, sometimes, history is not kind. And I think that that's something that is important if you're going to go to Europe too, if that works for you and your family, to experience that, because that's what I think that's what, I don't know, I'm kind of babbling here. I think that's what really makes a trip well-rounded sometimes. You can go there and have fun, but it's nice to see poignant moments in history too, and to have those experiences. So the other thing about Amsterdam is it's a city surrounded by canals, and it looks like you guys took a little boat tour.
We did. I'm not sure I can say the name of the people we took the boat tour with on the air.
Sure. Beavers like to build what?
It's called Those Damn Boat Guys. And they were great. They do small boat tours. So there's only 8 people on your boat. It's a semi-private tour. It's really reasonably priced, and it's a really relaxed tour. It's not a spiel, it's not a speech. They're just talking to you about life in Amsterdam, what it's like. It's never the same tour twice. And it was a great tour. They allow you to bring alcohol and food on board. And so we brought a picnic lunch. We stopped in a grocery store and picked up one of my favorite European treats is European cheeses and some crackers and some fruit and a bunch of non-alcoholic beer, which is a huge thing right now in Europe. And I am here for that. I am a big fan and enjoyed a nice way to do, kind of a casual lunch while still sort of seeing Amsterdam and getting some information. And we loved it. Absolutely was something I would do again. And it was kind of just a way for us to not have to, I don't want to say waste time eating lunch, but we're not people who love to sit in a restaurant for 2 hours necessarily at every meal and just relax and enjoy lunch. We really are. If you're on an itinerary with us, we're packing it in. And this was just a way to kind of combine both. And it was a great choice for us.
And what great scenery as you're having your lunch too, as you're getting to take in Amsterdam.
Yeah, no, it was, it was a rainy day. They go out, rain or shine, but we always kind of follow the European mentality of it's not bad weather, it's bad planning. And so we had our rain gear and out we went and we had a great time. It wasn't heavy rain, so it was fine. We were good.
And then you finished up with the church in the attic. What is that?
Okay, so the Church in the Attic is one of those things I saw in an article quite a few years ago, and I swear nobody's ever heard about it. People are like, what is this? It is this church that was built back when Catholic churches were not really allowed in Amsterdam, but were sort of allowed if you didn't advertise them, if that makes sense. And so they built this church inside of a merchant's house in basically the attic. And you go, well, okay, it's like a room. No, it's like a 3-story cathedral shrunk. It's crazy. It's absolutely like I had to see this in person. The first time I read about it, I was like, if I am ever in Amsterdam, this is the thing I'm doing. I have to see this in person. And it did not disappoint. The museum also allows you kind of a look into, part of it is seeing the merchant's home, and the rest of it they preserved, which is really cool to get to see that part of history as well. But I was really there for the church in the attic. And it was, it has a mini organ, it has mini balconies, everything is just sort of mini, and not like mini like it's a model, mini like you can walk through all of it, but it's all just shrunk down into like a really small size. And it was really stunning. Like the craft that was put into it, I think it was done in the 1700s, was great. And it was just really cool to see. I don't think it's for everybody, but it was definitely for me, for sure. And Jason had a good time too.
I'm gonna have to Google that and see what it looks like. I'm totally curious.
It's pink too. It's pink.
Huh.
Like it's pink. Like really pink. So you kind of go like, all right. But it's still a functioning church. They still hold services in there every week too, which was, really, really kind of cool to like, man, I don't know if you get like sort of like, yeah, it's just the church, but man, I couldn't help but want to go and look at that every week. It was super cool. So we had a really good time touring there. And, that's definitely not a place that DCL is heading, because I don't think it's on everybody's list, but it should be. And I know, Steve, you're like me. To be fair, Rick Steves also recommends the Church in the Attic, I found out.
There you go. If it's on Rick Steve's list, then it's something worth seeing. That's for sure. Okay, so we are probably not going to be able to touch on all the different ports here today, Lauren. So why don't you step us through some of the ones that you want to talk about where you had the most memorable experiences?
Oddly enough, the next day was probably one that was really memorable for us, and it was Bruges. And when we were going, our itinerary got changed, and we're suddenly going from all these ports we had been planning to go to for 3 years to a bunch of ports that I knew very little about for most of them. I was like, I had to like, where is Bruges? Like I had to look it up. And pretty quickly I realized that Bruges looked like a great city, but it felt like one of those cities where if I went and did it myself, I was going to walk around and look at a bunch of stuff and not really have any context or understanding of what I was looking at, and was just going to be seeing sights. And that didn't really feel like a good use of our time to me. And so I booked a private guide. I didn't do it through Disney, but I booked a private tour for Jason and I in Bruges. And Bruges blew us away. Bruges was the unexpected highlight of this cruise for sure. It is a city that is basically in a weird, not bad way, locked in time. from when it, was at its heyday as a guild town, and the buildings are all still there and the streets are all still there. And a good portion of it doesn't have a lot of car traffic, and the marketplace is still there, and stuff just hasn't changed. And so you get to see all the architecture. And Bruges was a really big town full of churches. The way that they laid out the town was every area of the town, or city in this case, kind of had a guild for their industries, and it had a church. And so all these churches are still there, and all these churches have artwork from throughout history. And even if you're not into artwork, we are not art people, but you can't help but want to look at this stuff and just be awed at the paintings and the artwork. We got to see my first Michelangelo statue that was done. I believe it's the Madonna, or Madonna and Child. I don't remember what the name is, but it's Madonna and Child sculpture out of marble that's in Bruges. You wouldn't expect to find it in Bruges, and it's there. It was commissioned and by, I believe it was a merchant, and brought to Bruges, and it's been in this church. It's actually part of, we found out on the tour, it was stolen during World War II, and now I cannot think of the name of the guys who went and got all the artifacts back. They made all the movies about it.
Yeah. You know what? I just bought the book for that they wrote about him, what the team that worked through Italy to bring a lot of that artwork back.
Yeah. And so you may see it mentioned in there. I've heard it's highlighted quite a bit because it's one of the big things that they were able to bring back. And so it's back in Bruges, and it's been there ever since. And so Bruges was great. A lot of people go to Bruges for the beer. That's a highlight of Bruges, and Belgium beer and Belgium chocolate. So there was definitely tons of that in Bruges. The views were great. There's lots of canals in Bruges again. There's lots of beer. We found some, I don't drink alcohol. And so I was really excited. Again, in Europe has become really big into non-alcoholic beer. And I was able to find some Belgium, which is a very specific type of non-alcohol or beer, to find some non-alcoholic Belgian beer. I got to try, we picked up some chocolates to try that were the, classic Belgian chocolates. And it was just a great day. And I kind of went into Bruges going, yeah, it looks all right. And left going, no, I really liked Bruges. So I think sometimes, you get in this case, we got a list and you're going, I don't know, take it for what it is and find out if you like it, because I don't think I would have personally scheduled myself to go to Bruges. And it was probably one of the highlights of the trip for us. We really, really enjoyed everything we saw in Bruges.
I love that. So it's the Monuments Men. Does that ring a bell?
Yes. The Monuments Men. Yes, absolutely.
Was there a movie about that?
There's a book. There's been a movie. I think the movie had Brad Pitt in it, right? Maybe? Yeah,
you're right. I saw, I haven't seen the movie, but I read the first book. Anyways, if anybody's interested, it's a pretty good read too. It's not boring as far as the way they track down artwork after World War II to return it to the different countries and where they belong. And to your point, I hate to say this because I enjoy art, but it's not something that I necessarily gravitate towards. But being able to see Madonna and Child kind of reminds me of when we went to the Louvre and we walked into this one room where there's a kind of a brick and a statue. It's called Winged Victory. And I've never been so moved by something like that. And it's just weird when you just don't know when something like that's going to hit you. So to your point, I think, being able to hear the stories behind art with a private guide and taking on that tour and kind of taking it all in that setting is just kind of magical.
Yeah, absolutely. It was for us too.
So, and by the way, that's one of my wife's favorite cities is Bruges. I've never been.
Oh, well, now you got one to check off on your list, and definitely go with somebody who knows the city. I was able to see Disney did do tours there, and we did pass some of them, and it was a big wall of people milling about looking at stuff. And I could tell really quickly that I got more out of Bruges than those tours did. And not because they weren't good tours, but because we were able to be really a lot more flexible and see a lot more stuff and get a lot more explanation than we would have on a Disney tour, just by the nature of Bruges. It's a walking city for sure.
And that's a good point too. If you haven't done Europe and maybe it's your first time, maybe stick with those Disney cruises if you feel more comfortable. But after you've been there a couple different times, you'll see that those big bus tours, unfortunately, you've got 40 people or however many people are on that bus, and you just don't get to see as much. Sometimes you don't get the stories. They do give you a lot of the guides. They'll give you headphones, but sometimes you miss out on it. So if there's a way that maybe you and your family can find a private tour like that and you feel comfortable, I think to your point, you can definitely take in and see a lot more. So what city do you want to go to next?
Why don't we go to Oslo?
Oslo, Norway, yes.
So listeners might remember that we were originally booked on an Iceland-Norway cruise that got canceled, and we turned into an Iceland land adventure back last year. And so we were really excited to finally at least step foot in Norway. It wasn't, the cruise we originally had planned, but for us, it was kind of a bonus to get to go back to somewhere. And Norway was, a place that we were pretty excited to go. We liked Alaska as our first cruise. And we've heard a lot of, if you like Alaska, you'll like Norway. And Oslo was probably the one I was most excited about for kind of I don't know. I don't want to say a dumb reason, but I was really excited to go see the Stave Church in Oslo, which is like the one that's in Epcot. I was excited to get to go see the real deal.
Those are iconic looking churches. Yeah,
it was. And so this cruise, just in general, the port arrival times, the port departure times changed not only several times in the planning, but even once we were on the cruise. And Oslo was one where we were supposed to originally have a half day, and they extended it to a full day, like legitimately, I think less than a week before we left. And they didn't announce it. They didn't send out an email. I happened to just notice it because I keep pretty close notes when I'm planning to do something on my own, especially. And we were planning to do Oslo on our own. And our port time changed dramatically from a 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. port to an 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we ended up getting an extra half day in Oslo, which was great. But man, if you weren't planning on that, you suddenly had an extra half day that we got very late, and Disney never told us about and never announced. So it's just kind of something to, if you're planning to do a port on your own, maybe keep track and check the app or the online itinerary regularly for your cruise, because these changes happen, and some Disney announced to us and some they just didn't. And so that was a great add-on for us because we got a full day in Oslo, which we weren't expecting, which we took to go to the Norwegian Museum of Cultural History, which is basically a long name for what everybody calls the living museum in Oslo. It's the open air museum. It's where they've got 150 buildings spanning the history of Norway. These are all authentic buildings, not recreations that they've moved from different parts of Norway. Everything from the grass-covered huts to the Stave Church to an entire apartment building, like a block that was an apartment building that they moved, and each apartment is set up from a different decade throughout history of the building, which was super cool. And so we got to span the history of Norway in one day. And of course, got to see some cultural dancing, hear some music, eat some waffles covered in strawberries, and another one covered in brown cheese, which was something I'd never heard of and was totally delicious. And so it was a great way to, have a more relaxed day. Although we were on our own, we had one thing we were doing, one museum. It was pretty easy to get to from the cruise ship by a ferry. And it allowed us to sort of slow down a little bit. Because like you said, if you're doing one of these port heavy cruises, you have just got to give yourself some slower days in there, or you're going to burn out halfway through.
So were most of these ports, were you able to walk into the city versus like when you do the Mediterranean, you end up having to take a bus for an hour a lot of times to get to the bigger towns. But most of these, the ship's pulling right into near the downtown, right?
How about 50-50? So,
okay.
So Amsterdam, we were supposed to pull in, and they had no water in the canals. And so we ended up having to park an hour away and get bussed in, but that wasn't the plan. Bruges, pull into a tiny town, but you're 30 minutes from Bruges. Oslo, we were right downtown. Warnemünde, you're in downtown Warnemünde, but nobody's going to Warnemünde. So you're probably going to get bussed somewhere in all reality. And so it's sort of half and half. Stavanger, we were right downtown. Fredericia, we were right downtown.
And then did you wander around the port area? I mean, the little downtown port area in Oslo, like where they've got all the ships and everything?
We did. If you've listened to me talk about any of our other travels, I am big on getting local treats and snacks. And so one of our goals in Oslo was to find a grocery store, which is a place we hit up often. And one of my favorite things in Europe to collect like Pokemon cards is potato chips. I love European potato chips. They come in the craziest and most delicious flavors. And so we pick up a bag or 2 or 5 in every port, and we end up bringing a lot of them home to snack on for the next month or so after the cruise. So I definitely walked around. I did see the city hall. We were too late to go in it. It's a stunning building, but I walked around also a little bit at the end of the cruise to get to the grocery store to bring my bag full of potato chips and a couple of non-alcoholic beers back onto the ship.
And pro tip for all you Disney Cruise Line fans out there that are going to Norway or someplace else, it's 2 bottles of wine that you can bring out in every port, but there is no limit on the bags of potato chips. So
no. They kind of look at you a little strange when I've got an entire grocery sack full of potato chips, but never been questioned about bringing on my unopened potato chips or bringing them back off unopened again. If I'm opening them, then I know I'm going to be eating them on the ship.
I joke, but make sure you listen to the port excursion people, or make sure you check the app as far as what you can bring off the ship, which is generally nothing, and some of the things that maybe you can bring back onto the ship. So just definitely check on that, but obviously not potato chips. Okay, 2 things to throw out: Stavanger and Ålesund. If you're sailing to Norway, they have kind of similar recreation towns like that, and I think those are really cool. Did they have actors out there too, kind of recreating things, or was it just more of the buildings?
They did. And believe it or not, most of the big cities in Europe have these open air museums, they call them. When we were originally planning this cruise and it had different cities, we were trying to decide between which one we went on that cruise. And like every city had one. So a lot of the big cities in like Scandinavia specifically all have them. And so like Helsinki has one and Sweden has them, and Copenhagen has one that's like 45 minutes away. And so they're kind of everywhere, and you just got to pick the one that works for your schedule or has what you're most interested in seeing. And for us, this one was the Stave Church specifically, which, by the way, is stunning in person. Like, wow, like pictures don't do it justice. And the outside looks great. And then you go on and the inside and you can see like the carvings and the painting that's all still original. And you're just like, really? Like, you just made this out of some wood? I mean, it's kind of unimaginable. I definitely couldn't make that out of wood. And the fact that they were able to build these things is pretty awe-inspiring to see in person, and did not disappoint. Go early when the museum's open. We got to go when there was nobody there, and we walked past it a couple hours later and it was packed with people. So if you have a choice, head straight to the church and then do stuff.
All right, where are we off to next, Lauren?
So, man, there's a lot of really good ports. We did cool stuff in every one, but I think one that sort of felt like it rounded out everything for us was Fredericia. And if you've never heard of Fredericia, me either. It's a little town in Denmark, and this was the first time Disney Cruise Line had ever been to Fredericia, and they rolled out the red carpet for us. We pulled in very early in the morning. I want to say we were docking before 7 a.m. And you woke up to hearing a band at 7 a.m. They had brought out a band. They had people in cultural dress. They had waving flags. And once the ship had actually fully docked, this was still before 8 a.m., I believe, they shot off cannons at the ship. Like, I mean, cannons and these little miniature, recreation cannons. And if you think a mini cannon can't be loud, let me tell you, it can. It reverberates off all the fjords that were around there. It was an experience to pull in. The town's coming out to wave all day long. People are walking back and forth to see the ship that's been parked. They've never seen a Disney ship. This is not a cruise port. We were in a port that is for industry. It really was right by town, but it's just it's like a dock. There's nothing there. I mean, there's nothing there. And so this was a big deal for the town to have the Disney ship. At one point, I saw that what looked like a preschool class came out and sat and had their lunch on the grass by the ship. I mean, just the whole town, everybody walked their dogs by the ship. It was the thing to see. And in case the welcome wasn't good enough, the send-off that night was absolutely I do not think I've ever seen anything like it, and I do not expect to see anything like it again. They brought out a ska band that played Disney songs. They brought out all the reenactors in their cultural outfits with their costumes and the flags. They brought out the cannons again. I think what had to have been at least half the town showed up for what was, I timed it, I believe, an hour like party. It was a party. The town was there to party. We were on the ship getting ready to leave. The town is standing there watching us, as we get ready to leave and to pull away. They're playing Disney music, which you could hear all over anywhere you were kind of on the ship outside. Everybody was picnicking and just having like this huge party. And it was so much fun. And you could just see this was a highlight for the town in the middle of summer, just something totally different. And everybody just came out to enjoy it with you. They brought out the Disney characters onto the deck to wave at everybody in town as we pulled away. We had the cannons salute us. We played the horn back. It was just the coolest thing. And it had nothing to do with what we saw on the port, which was also, amazing. But just the feeling of being somewhere where they were so excited to see us and we were so excited to be there really left an impression in us. And I will never, ever forget my day in Fredericia because of that.
It just goes to show you like the how Disney touches people all across the world to want to come out and see the ship. I mean, the ships are beautiful, and to reenact, have the reenactors out there, the cannons, and playing the Disney music as well. I think, wow, what an amazing moment for you guys.
No, it was great. And my understanding is that like the music didn't go on all day, but there was always somebody, no matter when your tour left or came back, they had the reenactors out there to greet you, to help point you to anything in town. They were like the welcoming crew. They wanted us to feel like we were the most special guests that they had ever had in town. And, that was not something Disney did. This was something the town did. And that extra special touch really, really this was our last port before we debarked the next day, and just made it for us. Like, what a way to finish our cruise in a place that was just so excited to have us there, and to share some of that joy back on our vacation was just kind of an extra special thing for us.
I love that. Before we get off in Copenhagen next year, I want to go back and just touch on two other ports real quick. So Warnemünde is usually the port that most cruise lines use to get you to Berlin. Just be aware that it's a 3+ hour bus ride each way to go to Berlin if you're going to do that. So that ends up being a long day. We decided not to do it when we were there. We went, I can't remember the little town. We went to another town that was nearby Warnemünde, and they had like the coolest church. Since you've been to churches, they had this clock in there, and it was developed like in the 1400s, and it ran out that year that we were there. Like, it was like they were going to have to add on to the clock. And what it was that like it kept track of during the different harvest seasons and stuff. So you never know what you're going to find in some of these little towns if you decide not to, do the big thing and go into Berlin. And then the other one I wanted to touch on real quick is you didn't get to do this. Jason did this one by himself, but he got to hike up Pulpit Rock. Could you talk about that a little bit? How did he like that?
Sure. He had a great time. We looked at, this was in Stavanger, and I love to walk. We walk everywhere. What I don't love to walk is straight uphill for like 4 hours. I'm not there for that. I'm not interested for that. I'm not doing it. And so we split up that day, and Jason went and hiked Pulpit Rock in the rain and had a blast. He like, highlight for him, I think, for sure. He had a great time. The pictures, oh man, my heart. They let you go. This is how it is. There's no railings. There's no stopping. They let you go right out on the edge of this giant cliff that overlooks the fjord, and just stand there. And people stand on a rock on the other side. And he met up with another person that was hiking alone, and they took some pictures of each other and stuff. And so, nope. And he did that through Disney. I know we've talked about, a lot of port adventures we did on our own, but we also book things through Disney. We are not against doing ports with Disney if it makes sense. If it's a long transfer, like in Warnemünde, we plan to go to a castle, and the really only way to get there is a rental car or Disney, and it was just easier to do it with Disney. We are not against it. We just try to have it make sense for us. If it makes sense to do it with Disney, for us, if it's a long transportation, if it's something that's risk of you not getting back, like going to Berlin, which is 3 hours away, we are happy to book with Disney Cruise Line. if they don't offer what we want to see, or it's just as easy for us to do it on our own for usually a little bit less cost, then we're happy to do that too. So I know sometimes it seems like we're talking about all this stuff we didn't do with Disney, but stuff with Disney is great. We are happy to book with Disney, and we have a really good time on all those things too. It definitely has a different feel, but I don't want to turn people away from booking through Disney either.
No, none whatsoever. And I just wanted to touch on Pulpit Rock, because if you've never seen it, make sure you go and Google it. It's Pulpit, Pulpit Rock. It's just an iconic scene of the fjords that you can get. We didn't climb it just like you. We were on a boat underneath it, and you could look up and you can see people's feet dangling from it, which I'm afraid of heights, so I couldn't imagine sitting up there like that. But amazing scenery if you get up there. Okay, so you guys get off in Copenhagen. Boy, you packed in a lot in 2 days. We went to both of these castles that you went to when we were there. Just an amazing walkable town too. Or you can ride a bike, I guess. They've just like Amsterdam, a lot of bike riding as well. What were some of your highlights? And I really want to talk about Tivoli Gardens, which was part of the inspiration for Disneyland when Walt Disney went there.
Yes. So when we knew we were going to go to Copenhagen, we knew we wanted to give ourselves at least a couple of days. In reality, I wish we had had more, but this was just what we could tack on. By adding Paris at the beginning, we only had so much wiggle room at the end, and we were able to give it 2 days. I feel like before I get into all the really awesome stuff we did, I feel like as like a reporter for the Disney Cruise Line podcast here, I need to put out that the situation at the port when we got off, I don't know if it's like this every cruise. This is my first cruise into Copenhagen, was awful. This was the worst debarkation I have ever had. And for the sole reason that you are pretty far away from the downtown area. They do not have good public transportation from the port. They do not have, when we were there, enough taxis to handle all the people getting off our ship. And there was a second ship that was also debarking the same day we were there. The line to get a taxi was 2 hours. And there really wasn't another good option. They have a public bus that came every half hour, but it's a small bus. We watched people wait in that as long as we waited for a taxi. And all I can say is if you can pre-plan your transportation in Copenhagen to get wherever you're going, or give yourself a huge buffer, because we did not plan on a 2-hour taxi wait, because we've never waited that long in any port we've ever been to with Disney Cruise Line. And that really put us behind our schedule a lot. Since we only had 2 days, we had planned to pack it in for that first day that we were in Copenhagen as a debarkation. You get off at 8:30. That's a full day of touring. And we did not leave the port till much later than 8:30. It was like 10:30.
I do remember that. I'm trying to remember how we left too, because we had to get to the airport to that day. So to your point, luckily, I know we had a later in the afternoon flight. So I think that alleviated our stress. But if you have an early flight, or if you want to pack in the day, to your point, Lauren, maybe pre-book your transportation out of there, because I do remember that little bus, and I'll take you to a train, and then you got to take the train in as well. So definitely think about that one.
Yeah. So once we finally got to our hotel, we stayed at a great hotel right by Central Station in downtown Copenhagen. It was an awesome hotel. The Anderson Boutique Hotel, I cannot recommend it enough. If you're going to stay in Copenhagen, this is a great place to stay. We loved the rooms. We loved the breakfast. We loved everything about it. And we barreled off on a train. We had originally planned to walk. It's a very walkable city. We were very late on time at this point, trying to get to our tickets to go to the Rosenborg Castle to see the crown jewels and the throne room. One of the highlights, again, you never know what's going to strike you in Rosenborg Castle. While the crown jewels were stunning, was back in the 1700s, the king of Copenhagen at the time collected glass, like glass dishes, glass vases, glass cups, and he put them all in a room and like wall to ceiling displayed them the way he liked. And they're still like that now. They have been in the same display in the same way since 1790. And this just struck me. I was like, man, this stuff's been like this for hundreds of years. And it's stunning. And it was super cool to see. One of those random things that I don't know if I would have been like, I'm going to go to Rosenborg to see colored glass, but loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Went back to our hotel, settled in, and then spent the rest of the evenings at Tivoli Gardens.
And what did you think of Tivoli Gardens?
All right. So I knew if I was going to go to Copenhagen as a Disney fan, I kind of had to go to Tivoli, right? It's one of the places Walt went for inspiration to the original Disneyland. We loved it. It was great. It's charming. It's the way they do it is it's kind of like the old school Disneyland. You pay a small fee to get in, and then you can either buy unlimited rides or pay per ride. And so the small fee gets you in to walk around like the garden area, and it gets you in to be able to either book or go to like restaurants, walk up restaurants. They have tons of sit down restaurants. In the summers, they do free concerts that go all evening, all over the grass, multiple concerts at the same time in different areas. All that stuff comes with your admission. And then you can either pay per ride or get an unlimited pass. And we did some of the rides. We didn't end up doing the roller coaster that's in the park that's been there like from the opening, that's still run by a brakeman. We definitely watched it. We just couldn't fit it in. We didn't have time. The line was really long, but it's super cool to see this old wooden coaster still run by a guy with a wooden brake handle where he stands up. It was crazy. We watched it while we had dinner, and we were just like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And so we did get to go on the Ferris wheel that's been there since World War II, which was super fun. We went on, swings. We had dinner in the beer garden. Again, I was super surprised, but overall in Europe, I had no problem getting vegetarian options everywhere we went. So I got a vegetarian option at a beer hall in Tivoli Gardens, and I wasn't expecting that. So, hey, for me, that was, that was a great day. They had a vegetarian sausage with my pretzel, and it was very German-esque experience inside Tivoli in the evening. Our goal was to stay till dark, which at that time of year was really late. We made it. Tivoli at night is all lit up with like twinkly lights everywhere in the gardens, on the buildings, and it was stunning. And it was absolutely worth staying late into the evening to see. We had a great day. It was a great day to to end out kind of that. What started out as a little rough of a day, we ended with a positive spin, enjoying the twinkly lights together in Tivoli.
It sounds magical. I wish we would have taken the time to do that, but we only had one night, unfortunately, and so we weren't able to do that. So we did the castles instead. So let's touch on your last day in Copenhagen before you guys head home. What did you guys have planned? You got to go see the Little Mermaid statue, which I know is, I think it's cool to be able to go and see it and everything like that. But what did you guys do? What did you think?
It was one of those things that we were going to be really close. And I was like, look, if I'm in Copenhagen, I don't know if I'm getting back here. I want to see it. I just want to say I've seen it. And so we did. We walked over to it after our lunch and went and saw it. It was cool. It was crowded. It was fun to see. It's, it is what it is. If you've seen pictures, you've seen it. But I also went and saw it. So I don't want to be, some people are like, well, it's not worth the time. If you're into it and you want to see it, it's totally worth your time.
Exactly.
If you're not into it, no, don't go out of your way. Honestly, it's a statue. It looks like all the other statues in the parks around Europe. Just a cool statue. We went and saw, another palace. There are tons of palaces around Copenhagen and just kind of in Denmark in general. We had to pick and choose which ones we thought we'd like kind of different. So we weren't seeing the same thing over and over and over, because just like if you've ever toured Europe, you can get churched out where you've just seen so many churches, they all sort of blend. You can totally do that with palaces and castles. And so we picked this one, Amalienborg, because it's more modern. They have like rooms from the 1950s and 1960s, and along with some historical rooms. So that was a really fun one to see. We made a quick stop. It's right by the Marble Church. And then one of the highlights for me in Copenhagen was our lunch that day. We went to a place called Restaurant Amelie. It's Michelin star recommended. And it was kind of a sort of really cool for me to get to go. I've never been to a Michelin star restaurant, and this one is Michelin recommended. It doesn't have a star yet, but it does only lunch, and it does the open face sandwiches that are super popular in Denmark. And so they do vegetarian options, they do regular meat options, they have all of the delicious European cheese that you cannot get in the United States. And so we went and had lunch outside on the little tables in the courtyard, overlooking the street, overlooking the palace. It was the most Denmark experience I feel like I had. Like, I just felt like for 45 minutes, I was a local in Denmark enjoying my lunch with everyone else. And that's kind of what we strive for. We really want to not just experience the tourist stuff, but get a sense and a feel of the city if we can. And that's not always possible with a cruise. You're in for, 8 or 10 hours. But if you work really hard and go in with that mentality, it can be done. This was something that could have been done for one day in Copenhagen and definitely left me wanting to go back. I want to spend more time in Denmark now after, getting to see some of the stuff we did on this cruise and spending some days in Copenhagen. It's definitely on my go back list. I don't know if I'll ever get to go back to anywhere on my go back list, but this one got added for sure.
Yeah, we really enjoyed Denmark too. We were only there for 2 days. One of the things that was really cool, I wish you could have done this, was that when we went to the castles there and then going to St. Petersburg, like just the difference between the palaces that were just massive in St. Petersburg, besides compared to the small little kind of quaint castles that they had in Denmark. But what, just an amazing country. People are so friendly, love the food there, and so many cool different things to see. So we would love to go back as well. Well, we're kind of running out of time here, Lauren. I know you had had a little hiccup getting back and everything else. I don't know if you want to touch on that, or should we just jump into some of your thoughts about how to travel to Europe and some tips?
No, we could talk about it. I think it's important when you're planning a trip to Europe, especially this summer. We sort of knew that travel was rough for a lot of people going in and out of Europe. And we specifically booked ourselves an extra buffer into our life. This was not like we booked an extra hotel, but we booked an extra buffer into what we committed to doing once we got home, knowing that something like what happened. We had a pretty early morning flight out of Copenhagen. It had a short stopover in Paris, and then we were headed straight back home. Through a series of issues with the plane and a whole bunch of stuff, we were excessively delayed in Copenhagen, which meant we missed our flight in Paris, which meant we also did not get home. We got to spend an extra night in the Paris airport hotel, which, they were great. They took care of us. But the reality is we were home by the time we had another delay on the flight leaving the next day. And by the time we got home, we were home 24 hours later than we had planned. And if I had booked this like rail to rail, which is something we do quite a bit in our travels to fit it all in, I am so glad with everything that happened this last summer in Europe that I took the advice to give ourselves an extra day just in our life planning. I don't know what this next summer is going to be like, but I think to really take in mind when you're planning that not everything goes correctly all the time. And if you don't give yourself a little grace in there, it's a lot more stressful if you've got to get back for work the next day versus if you're just like, well, it's one more day in Paris. I mean, how bad can it really be?
And if you're going to be stuck anywhere, that's not a bad place to be stuck, right?
Absolutely. I mean, all I saw was the hotel at the airport by the time this all happened. But again, I had a nice dinner and, didn't have to stress nearly as much as I would have if I had commitments the next day that I should have been home realistically. If everything had gone according to our plans and not everything had sort of fallen apart.
So I'm going to touch on one thing quick before we kind of wrap up with some of your final thoughts on traveling to Europe and whatnot, is that one of the things that's worked best for our family, and it seems like it worked for you and Jason too, is if you can do it, if you're going to spend the time to go all the way over to Europe, if you can add on, a couple of days either ahead of time or after the cruise, to your point, like the cruise is great because you get to go to a bunch of different places and you've got that familiarity of being back on the ship to move you from place to place to place and all the good Disney quality service and everything like that. But what we've really enjoyed is what you did too, is being able to have like a couple of days in whether it's a city or a couple of different countries or something like that, to take the time to really soak in being in Europe. And I think that this really worked out for you ahead of time in Paris and go to Disneyland Paris, but then also for a couple of days in Copenhagen. And I think that really rounds out a trip to Europe in my mind.
Absolutely. It's not always possible. I know on our first transatlantic, we only had like a day in Barcelona. It was just all we can fit. I absolutely understand people have commitments and vacations, but if you're looking at it and you can do it, I don't regret for a second putting those 3 extra days in Paris and those 2 extra days in Copenhagen. I think some of my best memories came from those 2 buffers on either end that weren't the cruise. And not to say the cruise wasn't great. It was. I loved every minute of it. But those 2, side trips were some of our best memories. And I don't think we even expected that. We just did it because we were like, well, if we're there, we're there. We're going to, see as much as we can and fit as much as we can in. And so I think if you can do it, absolutely take the time, even if it's not a city you're super excited about, take a day or 2. And you may find, like we did in Copenhagen, that man, it inspired us to want to go see more and more of Denmark. And I am super excited to someday go back and experience even more of what Copenhagen had to offer.
All good notes there. Okay, so final thoughts as far as traveling to Europe, this cruise, tips for people. What do you got there, Lauren?
Ooh, well, this is a totally random one, and this is somewhat personalized to me, but considering the amount of people who enjoy this, I think the non-alcoholic beer game in Europe is really stepped up. It has in America to some extent. Like I said, I don't drink alcohol, but I do enjoy like trying new non-alcoholic drinks. And the situation in Europe is they're everywhere. Every restaurant seems to have at least one. The grocery stores are packed. I mean, I went into a grocery store in Oslo and there was a legitimate wall, top to bottom in the grocery store of non-alcoholic beer options. And so, a lot of people like to go to bars or pubs to get the experience in different cities. And if you're going, well, I don't drink alcohol, why would I bother? Absolutely, in Europe, bother. Like, go for it. If somebody in your party wants to, schedule a pub visit, go ahead, because they're probably going to have at least something on their menu you can try as a drink. And that's not something that's necessarily common in the US. And I wouldn't have known without experiencing it myself that was an option. So it's just sort of a side note, but don't feel like you have to miss out on that, like, pub or bar culture in another city, which can be great. Like, it can be a big way that people socialize in different places in Europe, and you don't have to miss out if you choose not to drink alcohol. So that's kind of my little side note there. And then, I think pack your patience going to Europe, just in general. Know that it may not always go your way. Everything might not work out the way you wanted. Things might be challenging at points, but it doesn't mean that your trip isn't going to be great overall. I mean, we definitely had some moments like having a suitcase dropped on top of me, or missing a flight, or, running through the London train station that were not highlights of things that I'm like, wow, I would totally put that on my to-do list on a vacation. But, a couple of months later, the stories are fun to tell. And that's, I don't regret any moment of the trip, even with all the challenges. And so I think going into a trip, knowing that things are going to be interesting, some stuff's going to go wrong. And even when it goes wrong, it doesn't mean you're not still going to come home with a great memory and a great experience, and something that might touch your life in a way you weren't expecting, and leave you with, an indelible mark from a vacation.
And you had some thoughts about Disneyland Paris too, as well.
Yeah, so Disney parks always change. Our experience when we went on this cruise was going to Disneyland Paris was like going to Disneyland in California circa 2011 in all the good ways. All the things you missed and love that aren't sort of as prevalent in Disneyland these days, like lower lines, easier dining changes, things like that. Great entertainment everywhere, like street entertainment, people doing songs. There was always something on. It's all at Disneyland Paris. Again, this can all change a year from now. Who knows what's going to be happening? They are growing the parks. They're adding new stuff. They're adding a whole new land to the studios. But don't go with the old idea that I had definitely heard that Disneyland Paris was the park to miss. It was not, and I would go back again in a heartbeat. And right now, I think if you asked me to pick, I'd go to Disneyland Paris before I'd go to Disneyland.
Well, there you go. Those are big words. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for all you do for our podcast. I know for those of you who have heard Lauren before and have commented and enjoyed all all the information and the tips and kind of experiences that you and Jason have. If for those of you who are interested in Iceland, we did a really good episode 236. When you guys took your land vacation to Iceland, touched on a lot of different things there. Just a magical land to visit as well, packed full of a lot of information. So go back and take that. I'm not going to ask you, although I want to, where you guys are going to be heading next, because it's always a surprise, and I always look forward to that email when it pops up, or text now. So I just want to wish you guys all the best as we head into the holiday season. Thank you so much for all you've done for our show. And if you want to leave us with a little hint of where you're going, I'm all for that.
Sure. We never tell, but I will say it's going to be something new.
Well, there we go. Something new. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. Once again, just a magical trip to Europe. I'm glad you guys had just such a great time, and I appreciate all the tips and tricks that you provide our listeners over all your trips. And we look forward to talking to you when you get back off your next one.
Great. I can't wait. It's one of my favorite parts of my post-trip routine is getting to share all the excitement with you guys and the listeners. It brings an extra set of joy a couple of, weeks after a trip to talk about it all over again and hopefully inspire somebody to get out there and travel and enjoy the world.
Well, you've inspired me, that's for sure. So, well, once again, thank you so much. All the best to you as we head into the holiday seasons. And we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks again, Lauren.
Bye.
The DCL podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.